Okay, I'm gonna get y'all to introduce yourselves first. I mean, they probably know who you are, but this will help me too. So why don't we start with Chan?
Since I'll get one chance to talk about it. So I'm
No.
Chandler Hall. I work for Sentar. I'm the cybersecurity evangelist at Sentar, which basically means I enjoy getting in front of an audience. I do business development for them. And I have been focused for the first time in my 40-plus years of working career on one subject for the last 9 years. I'm ready to kill myself over this. CMMC, DPAR 7012, NIST 800-171, CMMC going way back to 1.0 in the 2020 lockdown years. Today, what it looks like today, I'm probably the person, because I am the salesperson with a little bit of overhead time, that's been able to read all the rules more than once. So I believe I deserve a spot on this panel, but it's sure making me feel nervous sitting here with the real true knees, who I have been trained by over all the years. So if I speak incorrectly, like everyone to my left.
I'm Steve Pratt. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Sentar, so I'm in charge of the compliance with Sentar. However, I'm also the lead over the business unit that does our CMMC, FedRAMP, and ICS cybersecurity. I'm also a lead assessor for CMMC, so I wear too many hats at Sentar. Yeah, we've been a C3PAO. We were the 21st C3PAO, which means we're an assessor and we can issue certifications to companies. We were the first one in the state of Alabama. I think there's 3 now. Yeah, I've been with Sentar since 2016, and I started out helping customers with NIST 171 compliance and things there. So it's been a long journey.
I'm Brad Proctor. I'm the Director of Operations at MAD Security. So MAD Security is a security operations center. It's primarily what we do. As Director of Operations, I oversee our 24/7 security operations center as well as our compliance team. And our entire focus is on the defense industrial base. So that's our primary niche. And our goal is to make you secure and therefore compliant out of that.
I'm Jacqueline Jones. I'm the head of the compliance department at MAD Security. I manage the compliance-related services that help clients get and meet CMMC requirements, such as we do gap analysis, risk assessment, tabletop exercises. We have a service called Virtual Compliance Manager, in which we help clients with remediation, and we also assist clients through their C3PO certification assessments.
Okay, my feeling is that you all want to leave here with no questions left. You will not know the answer. So if they answer a question and there's something you'd like clarification, just raise your hand and we'll try to, as we go, and we'll try to do that. You might have to do like you do in school, and hold your hand up, call on me. Dude, I don't know about you. If y'all see that guy's hand raised. Okay, this first question is for Steve. What are the top 3 mistakes contractors make that delay or derail their CMMC level 2 certification?
Okay, I would say the very first and foremost is that you need to scope your system correctly. System scoping is very, very important. It's the very first thing you should do on your journey to compliance. It's where you categorize each device on your system, where your CUI is going to be located. It's how you know what to protect and what controls apply to what. So that, we see a lot of people that are writing SSP and not even think about, what they're protecting. So the scoping is the first thing that I see that you should do. Second, I would say look at NIST Special Publication 800-171A. That is the assessment guide for NIST 171. Each control, there's 110 controls that you have to meet, but each control is divided up into 1 to 6 or 7 assessment objectives. And when we come in to assess, you have to meet every one of those assessment objectives for that control. If you miss one of them, you fail that control. And we see a lot of people, they'll look at the controls and they think they've got it, but they've missed something that is an assessment objective that they need to look at. So 171A is a document out there on the internet. You can get it. when you're doing your self-assessment and your preparation, you'll want to be sure that you're following that and that you're answering all of those objectives.
All right, Brad, you have anything to
So what I would say, and I'm going to jokingly say it, but it's scope, scope, scope. So the three things is that the thing that people miss with scope, though, a lot of times is that when they're scoping a system, is that they will look at how can I save money and create something that's not even functional, right? So they'll create this enclave and they'll say, we're going to use that, but they don't talk to any other part of the business and realize they can't even use it to function, to actually perform what they need to perform.
It doesn't fit their process.
It doesn't fit their process. No, yeah. That it happens often. And you have to, and it comes down to a lot of times it's not just an IT problem, right? This is not just a technology problem. This is a people problem. This is a technology and process problem as well. It all encompasses it all, and that has to be included in that scope, because if you get that wrong, everything else is wrong.
I really would like to follow up on that. I literally had a call from a company this week. Someone had said, oh, we talked to Chandler about this, someone at our company. And it was that. It was I could tell, and they don't identify it right at first. They don't say, hey, we're on the opposite side of IT. But it became real clear this 30-minute, we just have a question call became an hour and a half. And it was the politics between, they were the workers, they were the group, the business unit that did the work. And IT had chosen to do this lockdown secure enclave, and they just couldn't get anything done. And one of the things that they typically traditionally done at this company was they would bring in people to collaborate on the effort, and they would add them as a guest account. And IT was going, we can't do that. We have a policy that says we can't do that, and you'll force us, if we make a change, into having to pay for another C3PAO reassessment. We just got this thing. So they were looking at being handcuffed for 3 years because they didn't talk to each other. All right, it's amazing.
All right, anybody, any clarification needed by anybody on anything? Okay. All right, in my mind, this is the Star Wars question, I cannot help it. It's in my mind every time. What do C3PAOs like Sentar really prioritize when assessing compliance?
So, well, we want to make sure that you are protecting the data. You know, that's what we're charged with. The DoD with the Cyber AV has authorized several C3PAOs out there. We're at 77 of those now, and our main mission is to protect the CUI data that the government has and that entrusts to you guys as the contractors. So, you know, our main thing is when we come in to assess you, we're not trying to catch you or do a gotcha or anything or fail you on a technicality, but we want to make sure that you are meeting the requirements, that you are doing everything that you say you're doing. And you know, if we have to ask a question 5 different ways to get to that answer to make sure that we're comfortable with it, we'll do that, because our goal is to support you and make sure that you're certified, but also you know, not skimp in any way that would be detrimental to our nation's secrets.
Got nothing on that.
Any question on any of that? Okay, Steve, this is also for you. What technical or security practices make the biggest impact during the assessment?
Technical, or can you state that again?
What technical or security practices make the biggest impact during the assessment? Or are there any?
I don't know that there's any one that does more than any other. You know, there are things that you can implement that will check the box on several other controls. But I don't know that there's one really that in my mind stands out over any of the others.
This is kind of a follow-up from somebody who doesn't know anything. Is there something that people sometimes leave out that you have to say you need to include that?
Yes. So if you look at the NIST 171A, the assessment guide, there's a lot of, NIST 171 was written with latitude so that you could define how you do things. So there's a lot of things that say periodically assess or, do things frequently. With the 171A wants you to, and requires you to define what that is for your company. So, one of the examples is you have to do a security assessment periodically. You have to state that the frequency to which you do it. You have to define that somewhere in your system security plan or elsewhere. So if you do it annually or monthly, however you do. And then we're going to look to make sure you define that, and then we're going to look to make sure that you have implemented that as you have defined it. So if you haven't defined it, then that's one assessment objective that you didn't meet. And then we can't assess you as to whether you have done it as defined because you didn't define it. So that's two assessment objectives you miss right off the bat there. So anytime you see the word defined or identified in the assessment guide, you want to make sure that you've actually defined and identified those on paper somewhere.
Sir,
So two questions, pulling that thread. So for most of the policies that are being created, when you start defining things, the first initial audit of such will be like, let's just say August 21st, we first started doing this. So let's say assessment came in, we say we do it annually. Are there any frowns against, we only see one entry, you just did it? Just make sure you do it the following year. Are there any frowns about that?
So we do that. Oh, yeah, sure. So the question was, if you've got a new system, you say you're doing something annually, but the system, was created 6 months ago, you've done it once. How do we determine that it's annual? So when CMMC was first released, it's the cybersecurity maturity model certification. Is what CMMC stands for. When they moved from 1.0 to I think there was a stage between there, and then they went to 2.0. When they moved to 2.0, they took away some of those maturity requirements. So initially it was, your system has to be in place for a certain amount of time before it can be assessed and certified, et cetera. Now that's no longer required. So you can have a new system that you stood up and you started using, you applied all the controls to, and 2 months later you can get an assessment. We obviously if it's a new system and you say you assess it once a year, we're going to expect that you've assessed it once, and we're going to look for that report. We're going to look at the date on it. We're not going to penalize you because it's new, but we're going to make sure that you do have a repeatable process in place and that we're comfortable that you are going to repeat that annually, and go for there. Now, when we come back 3 years later to certify you again, then we're going to want to see each annual report that you've done that.
Then I follow it. So from a technical standpoint, FIPS validation, there's a lot of confusion about that. In the vein of wireless and those things. Are you seeing a lot of companies kind of trip up on that, or?
I would say that's the biggest thing that I see companies from a technical control trip up on. First of all, there's a difference between FIPS validation and FIPS certification. AES 256 is a FIPS certified algorithm, but FIPS validation means it's been tested against a specific way you're using it. And there's a cert number that you can go out and get. It is difficult. There are a lot of nuances to that. For example, for it to be FIPS validated, let's say that it was FIPS validated on a Windows 10 system and you've already upgraded to Windows 11. Well, that validation is no longer matches your input. But the government doesn't want you to delay upgrading to the latest and greatest just because they're behind on updating the validation. So what you do is you do the upgrade, you do an operational POAM, OPA, and you state that this is out of compliance for that reason. But you won't fail the control, and you'll still pass the control because we can still look at it and say, yeah, this is just a newer system for that. And then, but you'll have to track it and then update it once they've updated. It's not seen as, there's two types of POEMs. There's a POAM and then there's an operational POAM. And this is not really new, but it hasn't been out there long. But operational POAMs are where you should track your things that are not specific to a 171 control, that are, your vulnerabilities or, other things that would not cause you to fail an assessment. And those, right. And you could keep those open as long as you need to, as long as you're tracking them and working them. They don't count towards your 180-day, POAM requirement like the others.
Okay, Jack, this one is for you. The question reads, how far in advance should we begin our preparations to be truly ready?
If you haven't already started, I'd be concerned. The main thing, it really just comes down to what I recommend is you start with a gap analysis, right? You really have to identify how far off you are from meeting those 100 tank requirements. And then that's when you can truly make a judgment. Maybe you're, 20 points away, 30 points away. But if your score is, negative 50, then I would seriously consider putting it off. I mean, you really have to make sure that you're ready for that assessment. And I recommend at least getting most of your controls fully implemented before you even have that certificate, like before you're even within 2 months of that certification week, because you're going to have to do last minute prep. You're going to have to make sure everybody's ready to review the evidence, talk about the evidence, talk about your processes, procedures. But yeah, gap analysis is really kind of like the first step to see how far you really need to get yourself to be ready.
And
Probably have something I would add to that. Because of I'm really talking to people at a different part of their journey, usually sales, right? Sales cycle. They're talking to us about, can I get on your schedule and get assessed? I'm still working on this compliance, right? And what's dawned on me, really just in the past month, as I talked to some of them, is this aspect of everything up till now is under your control. Everything. Choosing when to start the journey, choosing what products you're going to use to fill those gaps, picking up a solution provider that's going to help you understand the gaps, fill the gaps. Every bit of that's under your control. When you do it, how much you spend, who you pick. Okay? Today, mostly under your control is finding a C3PAO that you can, accept the budget for. That you go, okay, that price is acceptable. I'll go ahead and I'll go with that one, right? As we go forward over the next rest of this year, if that 48 CFR rule publishes with an effective date that occurs before the end of this year, that is going to quickly be out of your control. Getting a C3PAO when you want it to come in and assess you, okay? You're going to take what is available, no matter the price, if you wait too long, okay? Right now, everybody that calls us is getting our most competitive bids ever, right? We've all been waiting to do assessments, sell assessments for 5 years, and the goalpost kept getting moved on us, which was a breath of relief for most of the customers. We understand that. That's good for you. You had more time. But this wall is compressing as we speak. Think of that Star Wars scene in the very first movie, they fall in the garbage hole, right? And so it's a smart practice to, in parallel, work your plan, understand what your plan is, pad the plan, but also work on getting a C3PAO under contract who's willing to give you a contract a year out. They'll show up a year from now. And in that, I would just recommend that you pick someone who's been in business enough years and has more than one team so that you can actually expect them to show up on that Monday and start the assessment. We have legal constraints of the type of personnel with the types of experiences we have to bring to that party, and there aren't enough of them. There are 76,000 contractors that need this over the next 3 years. There are today, I'll call it 76 because it makes it easy for the math in my head. 76 of us, I think there may be 77. I know there's 77, there may be 80 by now, but we can't birth them very, very quickly. And we can't find the lead CCAs very, very quickly. They need 13 years of experience in certain job categories, and they must pass essentially a secret level clearance. They're not getting a secret level clearance, So they get to go through the uncomfortable aspects of signing all those things and having the FBI, ask their neighbors about them. And they still don't get the clearance, but they have to do that in order to be a CCA. So you can imagine that takes out a certain level of my peer group in college that that won't be able to make the cut, right?
Chandler, could you talk a little bit about why you think it's going to publish sooner rather than later?
Yeah, in general, mostly based on the pundits of most of the knowledgeable folks. And of course, Jacob Horn in your organization is one of the leaders of understanding the behind the scenes aspects of rulemaking. In general, it just comes down to this. It has taken years of delays because they stepped back, recognized that maybe they had gone in the wrong direction, good bit of overreach, and they retrenched efforts, and that's what we call CMMC 2.0, focusing on an actual NIST standard and making sure that's getting and then getting the ecosystem in place. They've been doing that, but when they did that, they really stepped back and they went, wow, we needed to write a real rule. We needed to create a whole program for this. And so when they went in the hole and came out, when we went in the hole, we're all hearing, oh, we got to rewrite the rule. And we're all thinking it must be this 48 CFR rule that created CMMC, subpart 7021, created the requirement that we assess ourselves and turn in a score under SPRS. That's subpart 7019 and 7020, gives the government the right to audit that, right? So all those things have been going on, and I kept thinking myself, as much as I got to watch all these cyber, webinars and town halls and things, like, it must be that rule, it must be that rule. And then last October pops out the 32 CFR rule, which is a way larger, more encompassing program type rule, things like proper use of the American flag, proper wearing of uniforms, clearances, what they're allowed to do to give you a clearance, and what they're allowed to do if you do something wrong. Right, all that stuff's a 32 CFR rule, right? Big BRAC, we all know BRAC, right? We usually benefit here in this town from BRAC. That's a 32 CFR rule, very powerful, very big, right? The 48 CFR rule is what puts that on your contract, okay? So now that they've defined the real rule and all the aspects of that and made changes to that, put honest requirements on us that, of course, affect your cost. We have to bring to that party those 3 really highly experienced personnel, all right? That's in that 32 CFR. The 48 CFR rule has been getting tweaked. And it is really just a few pages. The 48 CFR rule, when it came out, was 470 pages. The actual rule is 170 of those pages, okay? The 32 CFR rule. The 48 that just got released to the OMB under ORIRA, the internal people have done everything they need to do to make sure it is correct legally. It's now gone to the Office of Management and Budget. There's reasons why a lot of belief is this isn't going to take that long. First off, because of the executive order in March that says you're going to get rid of 10 old rules for every new rule, OMB doesn't have a lot on their plate right now, okay? And the rule that they're looking at, the 48 CFR rule, they've seen before. And it's not that long. It's, I don't know, 10 pages, 15 pages, right? I really haven't counted it. But it's really not that long compared to the 32 massive brand new rule they went through, right? So no one's expecting that they'll take the full 90 allowed days. They actually could go to 120. No one's expecting even the 90, okay? And when it comes out, there is something that triggers whether you get a full required 60-day effective period between the published date and the effective date. The 32 CFR rule was economically significant, meaning financially, large penalties coming to the entire contractor base. So that was a published rule in mid-October, effective date 60 days later, mid-December, okay? This one is not even deemed economically significant. It literally is flowing down the things that we all know and understand from 32 and that we've been doing in the past, and it really isn't deemed economically significant to any contractor, and therefore it might take a week, it might take 4 weeks, not expected to take 60 days for it to be in effect. So we have a shortened time period that OMB may actually need to get it out the door. It might take a week or 2 after that for the DOD to publish it. The effective date may be a month is my guess, but I doubt it'll be more than that. And so all of that seems to add up to it coming out, being published in Q4 earlier and being effective before the end of the year. That's at least my guess, and I spend way too much of my life on this.
So,
Chandler, I can't help myself. And so I love the voice.
No, please.
Are there companies in this room who think that there are going to be exceptions or that they're counting on an exception because you're in a mission critical area?
Oh, I hear it when people talk about
So,
that.
Chandler, what's your take on that? I mean, I know the Jacob take, right, but,
Yeah.
um,
And
what's your take on
I draft right behind Jacob on that. He's really experienced in understanding the true, all the pinnings behind rules. And in general, they have defined it very clearly in the 32 CFR rule. The old days of a single company getting an exception on cybersecurity practices for a whole contract are gone. If it's significantly risky that the DoD can't afford to lose the suppliers on this particular contract, they have to make the entire contract an exception. And no one believes that's gonna be done.
And there's a memo that just kind of hit the social cyber, ether, right? Go check out Jacob, I don't know if he's published this one yet, but it specifically addresses Golden Dome. So if you think you're gonna get an exception because you're working Golden Dome, there's a DoD CIO letter that's out there that's starting to get some publicity that specifically says, thou shalt do CMMC plus 172 plus S bonds if you want a Golden Dome contract.
Yeah.
And that's particularly significant for this community.
Yeah, this is actually written by Katie Arrington, and Katie Arrington, a friend of mine, did biz dev stuff in Charleston where we have an office, and so that's where I kind of came in contact with her many years ago. She was the one that when she entered into the government in the Department of Sustainment and Acquisition, she was the one that created CMMC because she was sick and tired of losing business to people that weren't doing the rules, weren't doing cybersecurity as the thing that they'd signed under DFARS 252, 204, 7012. They weren't doing it, so they were cheaper. And she was losing business to someone who was basically cheating and cheaper, right? So she was the one that said, we're going to end that, and created CMMC, okay? As the program stalled and was retrenched and everything else, she went off on her own. She has been brought back under the new administration. She's not only brought back into being the CIO of this Office of Sustainment and Acquisition, she was made CIO of the Department of Defense, assistant CIO of that, and then temporarily the CIO of the Department of Defense. I'm not sure I think they've now gotten the person that's going to do that job permanently. I'm not sure she's been appointed yet, but so Katie Arrington is the one that created this program, has come back, made sure to get it through congressional review and to make sure that it's on President Trump's visibility again as to how critically important it is. And she's the one that wrote that memo, right?
And the memo specific to
Golden Dome.
Golden Dome.
Yeah.
So it's really important to educate your CEOs on if they think they're going to get an exception.
And it's more than CMMC being required if you're going to be in Golden Dome, more than level 2 that we're all kind of focused on right now. So it's a big deal.
I want to go back to timeline. I don't know that so I've been executing programs for the last 14 years, and everything is schedule driven, just like everybody else in this room. So tell me your experience with schedule reserve to get through some notional remediation, and also assume that a company they're already in the pipe, they're already scheduled for an assessment. Give me the timeline with some scheduled reserve in there. Give me an idea.
Kind of repeat that question a little bit.
I think Shannon's asking about, in general, what's a good schedule to plan on? If you're working on your assessment, let's say you're definitely above 50 in a score of SPRS, hopefully maybe above 80 even. You've still got a plan, you've still got some things you're having to maybe forklift in or out or make some changes to. What should you be planning? And then this actually comes often, and I'd say it's crept from a third of the customer base to about half the customer base when they're talking to us about this. If they are not working with a certified MSP or a RPO, registered practitioner in this space with a CCA on that staff, if they're not working with that kind of consulting power, that kind of experience, then we always recommend that they plan a mock trial assessment first. And that has gotten some confusion. A C3PAO can come in and do essentially a gap assessment, which y'all offer your clients. If they have not done gap assessments by a third party, I and Harold push that they consider getting a professional mock assessment at least from us, if not from a good solution provider who knows this, right? So that they have gone through one as a dress rehearsal and plan at least 2 months between that mock assessment and the actual certification, because if they find something at that phase, it's likely something they weren't expecting. It might take them a couple months to get it remediated.
And I'd like to add a little bit to that, the difference between gap assessment and mock assessment. So we, as a C3PAO, if we're conducting your formal assessment, we cannot give you any advice. All we can do is tell you, you did meet this control or you did not meet that control, and we can tell you why you didn't meet it, but we can't tell you what to do to fix it. So under a mock assessment, same thing. We would come in, we'd do the assessment, we'd tell you what you failed. You'd have to go back on your own to figure out how to fix that, and then we could come back and do the formal assessment later. A company like MAD here that can do a gap assessment, they can conduct the assessment for you just like we would, and then they can provide you guidance and help on meeting anything you didn't meet.
The biggest thing we've seen that companies make a mistake in is thinking it's, and I'm going to go back to this, that it's only technical implementation. And they look at just that time frame and they forget that they have to actually speak to how it's implemented and the processes that go along with that. And what we've seen be beneficial, yeah, mock assessment is great, gap assessment is great, is to force the team to do a dry run of who's going to say what and what they're going to show. Because that will find gaps in how you're going to execute on the assessment that you may not even know you had, that may not even be a POAM item that you thought existed. Because it's going to be someone not knowing how to go find that GPO, right? It's going to be someone not knowing where to click, or they might say the wrong thing they didn't mean to say, and you get in a whole nother area that you didn't expect to be in. So doing a dry run, going through and forcing the team members to answer it, that's going to answer it, is key.
Including HR.
Yeah, HR, marketing.
Thank you.
All right, Brad, you're doing so well, we're gonna ask you another one. Where do most organizations think they're ready, but they just aren't?
I think it kind of goes what I just said. But to go a little bit deeper into when they think they're ready is, again, they think it's technical implementation. They haven't looked at 171A, and they didn't realize that they had to document what they're doing, right? They may be doing it, but it's not documented. So in this world, it's not being done. That's probably the when they think they're ready, or they haven't really paid attention to where their CUI truly flows. They really haven't looked at data flow and understood that when we talked about technical controls earlier, and no one threw one out there, I'm going to throw one out there that will mess you up if you don't think about it. There's a lot of assumptions that'll be made about, hey, they're not allowed to do this because they don't have admin privileges. Oh, they're not going to be able to print because they can't add a printer. You don't have to be an admin to install a web browser. You don't have to be an admin to add a printer, right? So you can't say admin privilege stops it, right? So technical control, one very easy one, if you say they don't print, don't allow them to add printers, right? Otherwise, if they go to home, they can add a printer and they can print it wherever they want to. So don't miss the physical side media as well, because that part is going to be an issue.
I'm going to add one thing to that. So a lot, like Brad said, a lot of people push this down to their IT guy and say, this is your responsibility, make it happen. One of the biggest controls that your senior leadership need to be involved in is your annual risk assessments. That's 3.11.1. That is your senior leadership, your C-suite, whatever you call them. They have to conduct annual or periodic risk assessments. They're part of that, and we come in all the time, especially over the years of when we were doing more consulting work. We come in all the time, and the IT guys, I can't get my senior leadership to realize that they need to do this. And so, yeah, it can't just be pushed down to your IT people. There is involvement from the entire company.
I have one I would mention, literally this week. Read your documentation. And by that, what I mean is, especially if you bought your documentation, read it, because you should take out the fake company name and put your company name in there. Because we basically had to pause on an assessment this week for someone who didn't do that. Right?
Okay, Brad, you again. How can an MSSP like MAD Security help support continuous CMMC compliance, not just be ready for an assessment?
There's a couple of areas where it becomes difficult. When you look at security, right, security is ongoing. It's not something that you can just go turn it on and walk away. And a lot of companies don't have the manpower, they don't have the systems to be able to continuously do security, right? Whatever that is. They may have a great IT team, they can do configuration management, they can do these things that just make sense from an IT perspective, but the security aspect they're lacking. They don't have that ability. And to do that, like one that's kind of overlooked and a lot of times misinterpreted is review logged events, right? And what they're looking for is not the logs themselves, right? But actually what you're logging. A good MSSP and a good security operations center is going to do that for you. And what that means is that they're going to look to make sure that, okay, we have this agent pulling this data. Are we pulling the right data that we need in order to alert on? Right? That takes a lot, right? We do this a lot. We do this often. That is a very difficult thing to do. It takes a lot of manpower to do that. You have to know what the logs mean in order to make sure you get the logs that you are going to be to actually create the alerts that you're going to expect. Most companies don't have that, right? So by doing that, you're answering that control, and you're also drastically improving your security because you're continuously looking at, am I getting what I need in order to detect what I expect to detect?
No surprise here. That's why I make a joke. I'm already talking to customers that are thinking ahead to year 2, year 3 of self-attesting, and then year 4. So now I'm talking to them about, I'm trying to sell you your first one, and then they're wanting to know about paying for the 4th one, okay? And I'm like, when do you want to schedule that? Month before it expires? Because you're going to have year 2 and year 3 on your own. You're going to have more changes occurring after this assessment that you're paying us to come in and assess. You'll have more changes in the next 2 years than you've probably had in the past year, right? Because they're going to, oh, this isn't working. We need to open up the secure enclave or whatever, right? So I look at that and I go, you know what? You can either cut your 3-year cycle 6 months off early by having me come in 6 months before it expires because you don't really know, or you can go with the third-party organization continuously that's helping you stay compliant and maybe doing a gap assessment year 2, year 3, and now you can schedule me to go with a month of expiration, save yourself some of that money, right? And that may actually turn out to be a better use of the overall funds of the budget.
There's the continuous monitoring piece of it, right? There's security monitoring and then there's monitoring of the controls, right? So there's one part of monitoring the controls is to make sure that they've stayed implemented the way you intended them to stay implemented. There's also the fact that the part that people miss is all those things you wrote in your policy that you say you're going to do every quarter, that you say you're going to do every year. Those are part of continuous monitoring. Like that's part of that. And so having someone that can basically tap you on the shoulder, hey, have you done this? Right? To make sure that you did it. Because when it comes back to that 3-year cycle, they're going to, especially if you've been certified before, they're going to expect that evidence to match what you said you did.
Okay. It's another MAD security question. What advice would you give a company starting from a very low SPRS score?
Okay, so what a strategy we've been successful with our clients is you see a low score, you're overwhelmed, you don't know where to start. And so we ask them what they want to do. Are you in a hurry to increase your SPRS score as fast as you can? Or can we just concentrate on these 1-point controls to kind of get some quick wins? That's a really good strategy because you get almost worried that you can't beat the score, but then you start doing this 1 point control, this 1 point control. Yeah, your score is not going to increase that quickly, but you start to gain confidence like, hey, maybe I can do this. And so that's kind of like the strategy we recommend, is start with like, some basic controls, get those out of the way, and then save the harder ones. And there are some controls you can group together. Maybe they're related. You have to do technical configurations to software, and it's 2 controls at a time. And so we basically have like a process plan in place to where we say, we recommend you start with this control, this control, this control, and kind of like a logical sequence of implementation.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Timeline, I've seen your clients being, executing that, and there's the timeline for the assessment, right? But the time, like you've got a low SPRS score, how quickly can a company expect to make that transformation to be assessment ready?
Yeah, it all depends on time, resources, and money, really, how much they can devote to it. I mean, people on vacations. We have clients that say, I can do this in 60 days, and they're really ambitious. And then people are on vacation, someone has a baby. I mean, it's just like, things are just not realistic. I think now, probably about 6 months maybe. I mean, it really depends. And if they wear a lot of hats and this one person is trying to do CMMC all themselves, it's not as successful as they think it's going to be. So it's really hard to give you like an average. It's just to warn everybody, just keep in mind that it does take time, right? You're going to have to probably spend some money, and you're going to have to, and upper management needs to understand that you have to devote these resources to CMC so you can get the implementation done correctly.
Yeah, the timing really depends on what we've seen is the client will be, their engagement, right, is really what it comes down to from our perspective. We can move as fast as they can. It's just a matter of, most of the time, they're the ones moving slower than what we would expect. The ballpark time frame, if you want to be realistic, is usually 12 to 18 months. That's the kind of the going that we really kind of see, if you haven't started at all, really. If you haven't started at all. And even that, if you haven't started at all, can take time, right? Internal politics, when you start to look at scope of like, this is going to be included, this is not going to be included. You can't have this team, well, I need that team. That is usually the delay, not the actual implementation of the controls.
Steve, this question's for you. How do you balance business continuity with compliance requirements?
Give me all the hard questions.
You have the CISO title, sorry.
It's business continuity with compliance. So I think of business continuity as disaster recovery. And
We thought more it was about ongoing business, we hear this all the time, we don't have a budget to do CMMC.
Oh,
So you
yeah.
got to find a balance, right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, a lot of what I hear in that is, the government can't make us spend this much money on this now. And it's like, these exact requirements, with the exception of the third-party assessment, have been in your contract since the end of 2017. And so the DoD has assumed that since you have signed the contract and agreed that you have been doing this, that you've had all this implemented for the last 8 years. But and the only additional cost you have is hiring a company to do your certification. So it takes time. Brad is right. There are internal politics. There's end of year, end of month accounting, so you can't make major changes when your people are working overnight. You've got proposals that are due. You've got to work all around that. So it's challenging, and you just got to find those windows when you can do it. As far as budgeting goes, I try to, if not as easy now, but when we were helping companies 2 or 3 years ago, I would tell them, okay, let's look at your gaps. Let's look at, what are documentation changes. Do those this year. The ones that cost money, budget those for next year. Get it in the budget to approve it, so you can at least plan on that being a problem. That's a little harder now with it.
Breathing down your neck.
Right, but that's the way to do it if you can. Spread the cost out as best you can.
So business continuity, Funny enough, it's not really a big part of 800-171, so therefore CMMC. And the where you can really hit it, and if you really want to test it and kind of see if it's there, is when you do your annual tabletop, right? So if you do your tabletop exercise, the intent based on the control that we're looking at is to test your incident response plan. Well, if you want your incident response plan to fail, usually that means your business continuity plan kicks in, right? And your business continuity plan is not your incident response plan. They are two distinct things. So don't, this is a common thing that we will have happen is we'll say, hey, we need to see your incident response plan. And they hand us their business continuity plan. I'm like, that would mean your IRP failed, right? If you get that far, that means that the incident was material and you have a problem. Is when you do your tabletop, make it include the entirety of it. Meaning, go through your IRP and force it to fail so that you can get to business continuity and you actually can test it.
Which I guess brings in the sea level at some point, and you
Yep.
get to me. That works out real well.
Any questions?
No, that's good.
All right, Steve, this is for you again. What are the most incorrectly interpreted controls we see?
There's a few. So I touched on FIPS validation versus FIPS certification. Mobile code, that doesn't mean what's on your phone. Mobile code is JavaScript, things like that run on your computer. Mobile devices versus mobile platforms. Mobile devices, we think of tablets and smartphones. Mobile platforms would be laptops. And there's controls that deal with both of those. One objective that I hear that gets missed a lot. There is a requirement for password change. That if you change your password, so many characters have to be changed when you make that password change. And there's a control objective that says you have to define how many characters must be changed with your password when you change a password. Well, those of you that worked in the Windows world for long enough knows that that's not a setting. Microsoft will let you change it as long as you change one character. So a lot of people don't define that because they say, I can't set it, so I'm not going to define it. Well, we've got to see that it's defined. And if you're using Microsoft and you know that it's one character, define it as one character, must be changed. And that goes in your SSP and then we're good. But there's other controls that they make you define both sides. For example, you've got to define essential programs and you have to define non-essential programs. Well, you could probably give a definition of essential programs are programs that are required by our company to do business. Non-essential programs are ones that are not required by our company to do business. We'd like to see one of those be more than that. So you can say, essential programs are identified as the browser is needed to surf the internet, some tool used to be able to look at email, instant messaging, web, like Teams and Zoom or something like that. But one of those should be a detailed definition. You can make the other one, anything but that is considered non-essential. But we don't want to see a generic thing for both sides of that.
There also wrote a detailed explanation for blacklisting applications as well. So show me what's on the image, if you will, for standard apps, for non-essential apps. Is there a need for listing blacklisting apps as well?
So you could, okay, so the question was, is there for blacklisting of software, and what you do there? You actually have the choice. NIST 171 says that you need to either do whitelisting or blacklisting. One of the assessment objectives is that you have defined whether you are doing whitelisting or blacklisting, and then we look at it from that standpoint. For companies, just starting out, I would say a blacklist is easier because that's what you're saying you're not allowing on the system, and you can come up with something really fast for that. That's harder to maintain over time, so recommend doing a whitelisting where you say what is allowed. Does that answer your question?
It does, so for that company that's starting out, though, the CP3 is going to want to know how they're controlling that, so.
Yes.
Whether it's an egg something, whatever, to stop that. That evidence needed as well versus outside of just showing the list of that, right?
Right, you're right. So, that's actually a different control, but yeah, they want to see how you're enforcing that. And usually you can, if not everybody in your company is an administrator, you can protect a lot of it that way. But do, like Brad mentioned earlier, test it and make sure that they can't install.
All right, Chandler.
I got one.
This is you first. What documentation is important to provide the C3PAO prior to the start of the certification?
So this is the question that lets me get embarrassed. So it's a good question for me because I get asked that by customers all the time. What do we got to bring to this assessment, right? And it's in our contract, and we explain it. And there's a kickoff meeting, and Steve's team explains it to them, and yet there'll every once in a while be someone who doesn't bring that piece to the party, right? So I'd love for y'all to go, yeah, no, you're wrong on that, okay? But I probably overreach. I probably tell them more than they need, but I explain to them that, first of all, they're going to reach out to you and they're going to have your scope that you're proposing is going to be assessed. To Chandler, I say, I know that they go smoother, and I know that your scope is going to be better if you start with envisioning the CUI data flow. How does it get to you? Where does it sit when you have it? What do you do with it? Where does it go when you're done with it, right? So, crayons, draw colors, I love them. So draw you a CUI data flow. And then from that, maybe you can either visually envision or place a network diagram over there. And everywhere that DoD coronavirus called CUI has flown across the system, that system's now infected and in scope. Okay, so I tell them, bring a CUI data flow, bring a scope boundary diagram, which is that deliverable once they've taken the CUI data flow and they've now identified systems. And then this is where I'm not real comfortable, but I tell them, I say, then I know that it will be beneficial to you getting there, whether you really need to have this at the assessment or not. I would take every one of those systems and literally list the system name that you expect to be assessed and categorize it according to the CMMC asset class, so that you have shown the maturity of identifying every system, because it's you that's going to propose to this team, this is what our scope is, and this is what we expect to be assessed. Now, you're going to send that with your SSP, you're going to send that with your FIPS encryption identified products, you're going to send that with your policies, the procedures that say how you're implementing those policies, your plans like incident response, business continuity, disaster recovery. You're going to bring those plans. And then finally, there's a thing called SRM or CRM, shared resource matrix, client responsibility matrix. Essentially, any organization that is not you, that you are relying on for part of your compliance, like Microsoft GCC High, Microsoft 365 GCC High. Microsoft, in that example, is a supporting organization that you're relying on. The product you're relying on is GCC High, and they will have a matrix that shows which control they're 100% responsible for, which control they're 50% responsible for, etc. You need to provide those CRM, SRMs, and if you don't have them, you won't pass. And then if you're getting those, which you have to get, I'd go ahead and ask your supporting organization if they've got any documentation that discusses how they're doing those parts they're responsible for, and copy and paste that into your SSP under that control area. All right, so in general, I'm saying they need to bring some type of scope diagram, and more is better, CUI data flow, assessment of systems to be assessed, then the SSP, SRM, CRMs, policies, procedures, and plans, that they have all that ready before the assessment.
I'll add to that. So there's multiple phases to the assessment, and phase one is a readiness thing. So this is all in the rule, and the 32 rule, in the CMMC assessment process, and how we have to conduct them. So under phase one, we do need to see your scope. We'll meet with you have a scoping call where we meet with you, let you present the scope to us, make sure we understand it and that we agree to it. We have to look at your SSP when we do a cursory review of that. And what we're looking for during phase one is just that it's complete and that there's enough detail in there that we can make a determination of whether something's met or not met. We're not making the determination at that point. We're not looking to see, well, this is completely wrong, that's not going to work. We're just seeing, is there enough detail? Did they address every requirement? Is there enough to tell from that? That's what we need in phase one. Phase two, we try to do phase one a month prior to us doing the actual assessment, which is phase two. So you have time to make adjustmts. So, if we determine you're ready, you may not have your SSP fully in the final draft you want it to be assessed, but you've presented a version to us, and we've determined you're ready. You can present another one to us right before the assessment. So a week before the interviews, we ask you to send us the rest of everything, including an SSP update if you have it. If you reference a policy or a procedure or some other document in that SSP, we want to see that too. So if you say, we do a background screening check and this follows under our personnel security policy and our HR hiring process, we want to see that HR hiring process and that personnel security policy, because we need to, if you reference it, we need to review it. We review all that a week prior to conducting interviews so that we can understand your system better and we can tailor our questions for the interviews more to your system. So scoping, absolutely important. SSP, absolutely important. Only thing I would add to that for the actual assessment is anything you reference in that SSP.
See, that sounds reasonable. So there's many C3POs out there, right? That's a reasonable request. The cap is very vague in what the lead assessor needs to make a determination whether they're ready to assess. And what that's led to is C3POs out there that are asking for way more information in phase one. Won't name names, but there's phase one, I have been asked for evidence to support all 320 objectives in phase one. That is unreasonable.
I've heard firewalls. They want the whole firewall rules, all
Yeah.
the rules in a firewall.
And so the thing that you need to, when you're looking at C3PAOs as well, and I would say Sentar is a very good one, is what are they going to ask for in phase one? Ask them. Because if they're asking for all this evidence up front, what are they doing during the assessment? Right? That's my question. Is that, yes, you should have that information, but if they're asking for that up front, it's a red flag. So what Steve said, reasonable to make a determination. If you get any more questions than that, kind of unreasonable.
For Chandler, is there really a person that technical to look through firewall rules and policies?
It's amazing, right? No, seriously. I'm sure we've got at least one or two that could, and it may have been a JSV where DibCAC did that I recall from this. But they literally said they had a guy that was, and it was a guy, it was a man who that was his thing, was firewalls. And they literally asked for the entire firewall rules dumped and given to him. And then he went away for most of the week and came back and made some determinations on those. I'm stunned, right? I think that's very irregular. I don't think anyone's doing that much. But it's interesting to know that you're hearing other C3Os that are there, because I would be going, if they're asking for it, it's just more stuff that you could fail, right? That would be my fear, right?
Again, I don't want to take away that you should have that information.
Yeah.
Like, don't hear me that I'm saying you don't. You should have it, but offering that up in phase one just doesn't, it's not reasonable.
And if there's people in here that haven't already written their SSP, so you're starting from scratch, I would suggest that you call out each assessment objective and how you're meeting each objective rather than each control. It makes it a lot easier for us, and if we can go through it quickly and easy, it's a smoother week. If we have to sit there and dig and find that information because it's not clear that you've addressed each one, that can lead to us asking you more questions and the opportunity for you to say some extra stuff that we might hear that we want to pull on threads on.
You have a question?
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Done a lot of DOD assessments and stuff, and that FedRAMP, RMF world, and FedRAMP audits. Doing audits, going into, cloud service providers or DOD system and missile defense or wherever, a lot of times they'll have their artifacts already saved off, screenshots, and things like that. So I'm still kind of wired that way. I went through my CCP prepping exam course, probably about a month and a half ago. And the guy that was leading the course is a CCA. And he was giving an example, and he said that it makes him angry and frustrated when he shows up to do an assessment as a lead assessor, and a organization seeking compliance or certification hands him a bunch of screenshots.
Mhm.
So, what's your thoughts on that?
Photoshop.
Evidence that
Well-
it's all saved off beforehand.
So
Might wanna repeat
I'll
that.
repeat the question. So and I won't repeat it word for word, but screenshots of evidence ahead of the assessment. I always ask for it during the interviews. So a lot of people want to know what they can provide as evidence. We'll look at screenshots. I've had companies provide a lot of screenshots of settings. I'm usually the week prior when I'm prepping, I'm really focusing on the documentation and reading that and thinking about what I want to see as evidence. And the screenshot may not have that, what I want to see. I know that when DIBCAC does it, I have not seen their list. I don't think they publish it, but DIBCAC, which is the DCMA assessor group for the government, when they do theirs, they have a list of what they can, which controls they can accept a screenshot on and which ones they have to see a live screen share. I don't know how they make that determination, and I don't know if that list is published anywhere. I've never seen it. But in general, if I know that a control is a headache, one that most people would scream about, I want to see a live screen share of the setting because someone could easily check a box, take a screenshot, and uncheck it. If I'm looking at screenshots, I want them to be recent. I'm not going to accept one that's 3 years old. I'd like to see one that's more recent. But when I'm conducting assessments, I usually, at the point that I'm interviewing and asking that, I say, can you share your screen and bring that up and have us look at it? And a good way to prepare for that, in your plan or if you keep a little section of notes on what you're going to show in the assessment, put a link or something to what you need to see, or take a Word document and put, I need to go here, click on this, and this, and it'll bring up the window. People get nervous during assessments. I've had people spend 30 minutes trying to find a setting that they said, I've set this, I know it's somewhere here somewhere, but I can't remember where. And we give you time to find that and come back, but it goes more quickly if you've got a map of where you need to go to find a certain setting and show us. But to answer your question, screenshots I'm not crazy about, but I'll do look at them.
Well, to the gentleman's point about finding a good 3PAO, it just, to me, when that instructor / lead assessor made that comment, it reiterated me the frustration that people have with everything in cybersecurity compliance, which is subjective. And the instructor even said, when I see that, I scrutinize them even harder. And I'm like, wow, that's the kind of thing you deal with some 3PAOs and auditors. And I think what you said about finding an organization and asking them kind of how they do things is good to understand, because there's a lot of people out there that just look for reasons to fail.
Yeah. I don't look for reasons to fail people, but yeah, it's a lot. We are we've got so many assessments that we're going from. We're interviewing for a week. The first half of the next week, we're finalizing all the documents and getting ready for EMAS, and then we're immediately looking at all the evidence for the one that we've got to do the next week. And Screenshots just add more of us, things for us to look at. A lot of times the screenshots aren't organized. They might tell us this is for this control or this is for this, but we're looking at it might be a command line screenshot and we don't know what they're trying to show us in that screenshot. So that's very annoying. So yeah, I don't even look at them. I want to see them bring it up and then I want to ask questions like, okay, well, this says this in this corner. What does that mean? How is that, on this, certain firewalls, Sophos orders their rules differently. So, the deny by default, allow by exception doesn't look the same way it does in Cisco. And so, if I saw a screenshot and I was basing it off that, I might fail them just because it's in a different order. But if they're showing me a live screen share and I'm in the middle of the interview, they can say, this is how Sophos does it. And, I can verify that by looking at, going out and researching that firewall and verifying that, yeah, that's the way Sophos does that. So it's better to show the evidence during the interview process, in my opinion.
Okay, Chandler, finally.
Two questions.
Bad. As an MSSP that doesn't control their own CUI, why did you guys take all this time to prep and go through the process to become CMMC certified? And what does that do to help you prepare your clients ongoing to ask themselves?
So the reason MAD Security decided to get certified is one, we help people do it, so it might as well eat our own dog food and do exactly what they do. When we did our scope, we intentionally included more than we had to. We could have just been like some organizations and go and say our scope is this narrow, get certified, and no one would know what was in scope. No one would know. We don't have to tell you that. But we intentionally did everything that would encompass us delivering a service. And that includes SIM, that includes any data we may exchange with clients. All of that's included as part of that. And so the reason we did it is that one, after we got our certification, we've had several after that, and the conversations with the assessor has been a lot easier, right? So as a service provider, what people forget is that you got to sit on these. You're going to be interviewed. And if you don't get certified, you're going to be scrutinized more than if you didn't. So that's part of it.
I definitely can answer this. And by the way, for the whole audience, there has constantly been, month after month after month, I've watched these things for years, every Friday. The Cyber AV is an organization that creates and anoints instructors where these folks get their credentials, and they, have the requirements and anoint C3PAOs that have met the background checks and other things like that. So every week, all of the competitors get on the same phone call, co-opetition, as Scott McNeely defined back in the 90s. We get on the same call and we talk about things. I carry water for those folks a lot. They're like, we see this too frequently. We need the DoD to clarify what they're really expecting here. And so Cyber here's that. They'll take it to the DoD. There'll be conversations. They'll bring it back, and then they'll clarify it to our group. Sometimes those clarifications have been coming more and more rapidly this year, and they are sometimes 180 degrees opposite of what they clarified in January, right? So the misinformation that is out there on LinkedIn, that is out there in conversations, is high. And it definitely is worthwhile going back to C3PAOs, CCAs, and maybe asking those tougher questions again. Make sure that hasn't changed on you. And this is one of them, which is essentially today, when I'm sitting here trying to figure out what the quote is for this person and give them some idea of the price, okay? And they say they've picked an MSP, and I ask, are they CMMC level 2 certified? And they're not. They could end up, that organization seeking to get compliant could end up having to pay for the cost of their MSP also being certified by our team. Okay? If they're assessed by the team. So we essentially could have to do 80% to 100% more work, more cost to the customer if they've used an MSP that's not certified at this point. That has been more recently clarified to be that way. And so, in some cases it may not quite be as bad as that, but I want you to recognize that if you're using an MSP that is not certified, there is a likelihood that you're gonna be paying more in cost, and you should investigate that further with a potential C3PAO. Ooh, that raised some hands.
Well,
Greg?
so we have a CMMC certified MSP. However, the government sources, services that are being offered, can you hear me? 'Cause I can't hear
Yes,
you
yes.
guys very well, so
Oh,
I
no.
don't know if I'm talking well, loud. Like, DICE, or Dark Cube, BDP dashboard. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this.
I am.
The Acromaster, all of those. What about those with documentation, certification? I mean, a lot of times you talk to them that are provided by the DOD and they kind of do that.
Oh.
Yeah, so.
It's not all, but they don't have stuff a lot of times. So, yeah, we're struggling with how to move forward with that.
Yeah, so there are some free programs, and I think that might be what you're discussing. So like DICE does the Dark Cube thing, and we use that too. Yeah, and they usually, in their brochures, or their, slick sheets that they put out, they do say which controls that helps with. You're still responsible for documenting that in your SSP, that you take advantage of this program and what that does for you. I would, I think they have a shared responsibility matrix. They should if they don't. But
one.
yeah, make one so you know what's your responsibility versus theirs, and you can speak to that in your SSP. I've never seen any of them show up to a CMMC assessment where they would do that for you. So you pretty much have to speak to that on their behalf.
Okay, so we were confused because, with all the talks, with all the things within, you have to, these people have to be at this level of yada, 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 for you to even use them, whatever. Well, they don't have a lot of the stuff that's required. So we were thinking, can we use them? Is this gonna mess us up on our next assessment, sorry. Cause we got our certification in 23, and now we're preparing for the second. But things have changed since we went through the JSBA, program. So we're like, can we even implement these guys now? They're great, they help us, we're a very, very small company. So we were just making, so you're saying SRM and have one,
Yeah.
whoever needs to make it.
Right.
Is pretty, like, what about SOC 2 kind of things? I mean, anything else that you advise to try and get from them?
So anything you can get from them, ask them if they would sit in on a C3PAO assessment. Ask them how they're, meeting that requirement for those clients. But in most cases where I've seen that, they're, they don't really consider themselves an MSP or an MSSP, so they don't really fit in that ESP category that CMMC has. So the way I have assessed that is I look at that as the OSC's responsibility to maintain that, and they utilize this service that helps them. But we need to see the evidence that it's, that they're using it and how they're using it.
In general, we take that a little bit higher up, though. We do get asked, I know, at our level, at the phase, cloud applications that are in use. Hey, we're using this cloud application. I'm like, are you storing a processing CUI inside that? And if they are, of course, there's that requirement to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent. And if they're not one of those, and even equivalence one is a little stretch, right? If they're not one of those, I tell them, look, I know I'm just a salesperson, but I would think twice about using it. That if you can't meet the letter of that, at my level anyway, I think there's risk that's high. At that point, I would turn to Reddit/CMMC. I would go on LinkedIn and ask the pundits. There's a great Summit 7 CUI hotline that happens every Friday. You can call in. Okay, all right. Okay, what you got?
Did you know the MSP Collective? So it's a nonprofit
Yes.
of MSPs and MSSPs, where you don't even have to be a member, but they go through the SRM, right? I know we're talking about MAD security. So once you are a certified provider, and you have a CMMC certification and you're an MSP or an MSSP, you can be listed on the MSP collective so that, companies like you can identify the providers that are certified and are gonna be a part of your CUI solution. So this is not a Summit 7 thing
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
This is, an industry policing, right? Self-policing. And maybe policing is a strong word, but this is the industry trying to give credibility to companies like MAD Security who are doing the right thing and are going to give you a quality service. So take a look at the MSP Collective, and ask those government, sponsored providers if they, would get certified and become a part of the MSP Collective.
Well, I mean, they're not, they're providing services, but they're not really doing the CUI.
Yeah.
Still,
Yeah.
what you hear on in community with Kenny things,
Well,
you just don't know.
the specific ones you were talking about, like the dark cube, so that's a security protection asset. So it's involved in the security. So it's not CUI. They are dealing with security protection data. There's slightly different requirements for that. But yeah, they are not required to be FedRAMP unless they are handling CUI.
And that's really a good way to kind of wrap this up. If you're all struggling with any of these kind of questions, because the way you said at the very end, I would have immediately gone to a customer like, okay, there's no CUI in there. So we don't even have to even get into whether it is a cloud application. There's a whole thing on ESP that's not a CSP, but an MSP. Oh my, it has gotten beat to death and changed several times. And so it really does get down to the specifics. And if you're struggling with those, first, at least foremostly think, has it been affected by this DoD coronavirus called CUI? Has it been touched? And if it hasn't been touched, then it becomes less of a, can I use that product or not? And then becomes more of a, is that product even in scope? What is it doing? Oh, it's a system that is protecting systems with CUI. It's a security protection asset. So it is in scope, but it's been literally the one cloud product that has been exceptionally ruled out by the DoD in this year as a security protection asset, while a cloud product don't have to have FedRAMP moderate or equivalent because none of them have done it. And they don't really need it, but they do talk about, you need to at least identify those systems. They are in scope, and the type of data they create, security protection data, log files, you must control as if they're CUI, but they're not, which again means they're not triggering other things like FedRAMP moderate.
Well, I want to add just a little bit to that. When you are talking to a cloud service provider that needs to be FedRAMP moderate or equivalent, if they're FedRAMP authorized, they're going to be on the FedRAMP.gov marketplace. Look for them there. One of the things I hear a lot from software as a service companies is you ask them if they're FedRAMP authorized, and they say, "Yep, we're hosted on Amazon GovCloud," and that doesn't mean anything. That means that
Amazon's on there.
That means that once they go for their FedRAMP authorization, they can inherit some controls from Amazon GovCloud, but they are not. That doesn't meet the requirement just because they're hosted on a FedRAMP authorized system. So, and again, moderate is a little different. So there's not really moderate equivalent is a little different. There's not a marketplace for the ones that meet equivalency. So that's a little harder to get, but to be considered FedRAMP moderate equivalent, they would have had to have been assessed by a C3PA or a FedRAMP 3PAO and receive a statement that they've met the requirements. So you can ask for that to verify.
And if they aren't already, and they're saying, oh, I'm gonna get there,
Yeah.
realize that could take a year or two.
Yes.
Yes.
So don't take that as an answer. I'm working on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that may not meet your
Yeah,
requirements.
especially if you're about to write a check and invest in that product for the next several years, you don't want to do it if it's
You
not
don't have
FedRAMP
time to
moderate.
mess around with a company that is thinking about getting that.
Because they may not be able to. They may not get a sponsor. And if they can't get a sponsor, they're not going to be FedRAMP moderate. It's as simple as that.
While I'm talking, can I get some, clarification on this? What you said about the fixed validation for the Windows 10?
Mhm.
You said just do a operational program, can you restate that so I make sure my notes are right?
Yeah, so the OPA kind of came up as a thing after when CMMC started saying you can't have any POAM items, or these are the only items you can have on your POAM, you can only have them a maximum of 180 days. That is really about the specific control implementations and which controls are not meeting. So to capture that information on a POAM that is not limited to 180 days, they came up with the notion of the operational POAM. Sometimes this OPA is the or operational plan of action is what it's called. But it allows you to put things like your risk, things identified in your risk assessments, vulnerabilities that are out there, and other things you might track that are not specific to a control. And for the FIPS validation, if you are using a something that was FIPS validated in a previous software or hardware version, and now it's no longer validated because you've upgraded to the next version, you would put that on your OPA and just track it there. And you might put on there, every month or every year, I'm looking to see if that new one's been validated, so I can grab that certificate and close that out. And then you would just show your assessor, this was the cert it was on the older version, here it is on my OPA, I'm tracking it, and the assessor should let you go as fine. I would pass it.
We just ran into that last week, and like, what do we do? Okay.
That actually gets asked a lot, and I definitely have been trained by this group to, if nothing else, bring to this assessment all of your encryption technology, whatever product you're using encryption in, put them all on one page. Call it your FIPS encryption, monitoring page or whatever in your SSP. So you're listing your browser, and you do the research for your VPN, and you do the research for any other encryption switch or whatever, and you go literally in a column next to it, write down the FIPS validated version, and oftentimes that's 1.0. And because of vulnerability patches, which a control makes you go up to, you're running on 1.9, right? And so I just tell them, I know they go smoother if at least you show you're aware of that. You bring in your SSP that I'm using these encryption technologies, I've researched the verified ones, the validated FIPS versions, but I'm running on something new. And just go ahead and show that, right? What I learned today was I could have written that down and had that as my SSP, and I would have been tracking a browser version in Windows 10, and now I've been upgraded to Windows 11. I guess the browser version changes, so all of a sudden I may not be on the validated version anymore without even realizing, because the OS changed underneath me. I didn't think about that, right? But yeah, that I think at least shows that maturity aspect, and I think the assessors are pleased when they see that you're aware of that. And that's been the recommendation for a while, and I would always say, I don't know how they handle it when they assess you and you're actually calling out, you're not running on the validated version. I don't know how my team handles it, but I know that that's what they want to see. And now he's explaining that what they're saying nowadays is put those on your operational POAM and just show in your periodic defined aspect, we again looked at whether there was a new version that's validated. If there's not, we'll look again next quarter, and then next year, I would maybe do a product check. Is there a product that could replace this product this year? We did a product check, nothing that was the same price. We will wait until next year. I mean, I would do the checkboxy kind of stuff for monitoring, showing that you're aware of it, showing that you're doing it periodically, but you're still staying on the right stuff.
I have one thing to say about FIPS. One thing, I have to say one thing now that I said that, is I have seen people go overboard with FIPS. And so what I tell people to do is it goes back to the data flow. All right, and the example I'm going to use in this, because it's a common issue, is let's say all of your CUI resides on, you have it on an endpoint, and then it's in Microsoft GCC High, right? Let's say that's the scenario. If that is where it's stored, your VPN does not matter, because the lowest level of encryption is between that browser session or that app session and where it's stored. Everything above that doesn't matter.
Yeah, the specific, where he's going, the specific requirement is that if you are relying on cryptography to protect CUI, it has to be FIPS validated encryption module. And another example that I like to give there is if I'm on my endpoint and I'm sitting in an office and I'm connected to GCC High, and the only way that CUI is flowing is through there, that GCC High tenant is forcing a FIPS validated encryption between my endpoint and there. It doesn't matter if my firewall is FIPS validated or not. It's protecting going out to the internet. There's something there, but I'm not relying on the firewall to protect that CUI. I'm relying on that connection to GCC High. So that firewall does not need to be FIPS validated. Now you've got to be able to explain that to your assessor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And argue with that if they don't accept it. We had, I mean, you know, but they took insurance.
So as a C3PAO, we have to be assessed by DIBCAC every 3 years to maintain that. And the first time we did it was before we did a firewall upgrade, and our firewalls were not FIPS validated. And I used that argument and won with the DIBCAC assessor. But yeah, you have to know that that's there and that you can do that. And I would say most CCAs know that as well and would understand it. But you have to be able to explain that that's the only way that that's happening. You also have to tell them through your CUI data flow that that's the only way it's flowing through that firewall is between that endpoint and GCC High or some other thing that's going to force a FIPS validated tunnel.
Anything that you haven't said that you'd like to make sure everybody leaves with?
There are 77 C3PAOs out there. There are 70,000 companies that are going to need this. At least be getting quotes if nothing else. Talk to several C3PAOs. Do whatever you can to get it on their calendar. Even if you're not ready and you think I'm not going to be doing this until next year, our calendar goes out 2 years at least, maybe 3. So we've got people well into late 2026 on our calendar. I'm not saying we're booked until then, but if we understand you're not ready, but it's good to get on the calendar so that when you are ready, you have somebody that's available.
I would just go off the name of what today's event was CMMC without fear, right? That's the premise of why we're here. It's a big mountain to get over in many cases for a lot of companies. There's a lot of unknowns. Don't just take what you see out there at face value. Kind of research it. Make sure you're finding the right organizations to partner with, whether it's a C3PAO or an MSP, MSSP. And when you get down to it, if you do all the right things and you're looking at it, you're going to be nervous before that assessment. It's going to happen. Just during ours, I was extremely nervous, and I've done these before. And I had word of wisdom from someone on our team, and he looked at me and goes, "Brad, you're close to it. You know everything. It's going to be okay." So when you're very close to the issue, a lot of times it blurs what you actually think is going to happen. The assessor doesn't know what you know about your organization. So that's why you're going to be anxious. Yeah, you're going to be nervous, but go in prepared and you'll be fine.
Okay, you have experts right in front of you. You have any questions?
Thank y'all for attending.
And if you've got questions and you want to contact MAD Security or Sentar, we don't pay Chandler, so he's free to us. So ask him. Take as much time as you want with him. And
You won't have that story, so I'll have to call.
Never found that.
Never heard do that, Steve. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, our moderator, y'all. Whoop, one more.
So, Rev 3.
Yep.
What do you think about that? We are not preparing for Rev 3, but we're solidifying and
Yeah, I would focus on Rev 2 until you're certified. You already been through GSV, and you got,
December of twenty.
Still gonna be Rev 2, I bet.
yeah, it's probably still gonna be Rev 2. They,
There you go.
they have stated that until 48, when 48 comes out, there's a 4-year phase. They want it all implemented, everybody in under Rev 2 before they look at Rev 3. There is a box when we fill out our paperwork that has to go into EMAS for an assessment. We have the option that if the company has done Rev 3, we can assess the Rev 3 and we can check that. But it's not required yet, and there's a lot with Rev 3 that's the things like that setting of frequency of how often you do stuff. There's like in RMF and FedRAMP, it will be organizationally defined, and that organization that defines that will be DoD. So you're going to have a little bit more of a tough time with Rev 3 than Rev 2, a little less choices that you can make on your own. So I would go ahead and be looking at it and preparing on how you do it, but try to get assessed at Rev 2. I don't think if you implemented Rev 3, I don't think you wouldn't pass Rev 2. I don't think there's anything that back steps or anything, but I would focus all your documentation stuff on Rev 2 still.
And before you make that shift, I would at least reach out to whoever you've used in the C3PAO and say, we're looking at year 2028 being Rev 3, whether the DoD is requiring or not. Will you have a team that can walk in and handle that smoothly?
We're actually scheduled already for December 26th.
Yep.
So, but I didn't, my CTO made the call.
Yep.
He told me what he said. I don't know if, but yeah, and I think that's what, would you advise, would you be like, like, my best advice would be,
In this
like,
case,
stick it with level 2?
I would definitely, with everything I've learned, I would be sticking with Rev 2, just because there are control name changes, things like that. I want my documentation, everything to always be consistent, unless I have worked with the C3PA that said, no, we'll have, a lead CCA or whatever, brush up on Rev 3. They'll be familiar, they'll have a mapping diagram between Rev 2, Rev 3. If you want to go to Rev 3, we will check that box in EMAS and we'll assess against that, but I would not do that without the C3PAO agreeing that they're ready to come in and do that with you, right?
What we've seen be most helpful is the DoD released the ODVs, which are the organizationally defined values. Use those in your Rev 2 implementation. That way, when you get to Rev 3, yeah.
Now, in our, we just changed the future fee.
Yep.
And so I'm everything, we're working that, and, because we were all just very documents and stuff before now, using the system, and I love it, but it's, a hassle getting everything set up. So they will actually have a Rev 3 button, you can just click Rev 2, Rev 3, and you'll have, but that's what we thought wise. Let's just go ahead and implement it. If we're over, performing, I don't think that'll be a bad thing.
It would be, but if your C3PAO walks in with a kind of a newer team, a younger team maybe, that's not even looked at Rev 3, they're gonna struggle, and they may not be happy, right? Validate with your C3PA that they're prepared to assess a Rev 3 if you're gonna go that route.
So just add on a little bit. So something we see is if someone hasn't gotten like a period of activity already defined and the ODP says it's 15 minutes, we tell them to go ahead and do 15 minutes. Because if they set 10 minutes right now, when revision 3 is required, they're going to have to change it. So that's kind of like an example of how we tell people, there's some requirements you can go ahead and implement, but we don't tell them, hey, you need to spend a lot of time implementing revision 3 because revision 2 is what we're going to get assessed against. So kind of an example of that.